What if the biggest thief in the room was wearing a suit and carrying a flag? What if the textbooks left out the torture chambers, the massacres, the stolen wealth? And what if the pain of millions was buried under silence, all for the comfort of empire? Welcome to Sands of History, where we uncover the brutal truths buried under centuries of dust. Today, we're diving into the dark and haunting legacy of French crimes in Africa, from colonial conquest to modern-day exploitation. If you value the truth and want to support our work, please consider helping us financially. Links are in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video so more people can learn what really happened. The Scramble and the Saber, a vicious conquest. In 1885, European powers gathered in Berlin to divide Africa like spoils of war. France, weakened in Europe after its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, now saw an opportunity to dominate a different battlefield. What followed was one of the most violent episodes in modern history. From Senegal to Chad, from Mali to Madagascar, French forces imposed their rule through fire and steel. Villages were razed. Entire kingdoms, like the Tukulor Empire in Mali and the Wadai Empire in Chad, were crushed under artillery and gunfire. In Madagascar, resistance to French rule was met with a scorched earth policy. The Menelamba Rebellion, 1895 to 1897, saw tens of thousands of Malagasy killed, many tortured or executed without trial. Civilians were not spared, and French soldiers were known to commit mass rapes and public hangings. In every region, France imposed its will through forced recruitment of local soldiers, tirailleurs sénégalais, Africans made to fight for the very empire that enslaved them. And when these veterans demanded fair treatment after World War II, dozens were gunned down by French troops in the Arroy Massacre in 1944. Their only crime? Asking for their wages. The rubber, the blood, and the whip. In French Equatorial Africa, the economy was built on exploitation, especially in the rubber trade. The French government handed over huge swaths of land to private companies, which enslaved local populations under rubber quotas. Those who failed to meet these quotas suffered the most horrific punishments. Women were taken hostage, children were beaten, villages were burned, and those who still refused were mutilated, limbs cut off as warnings to others. This reign of terror was made legal through the Code des Indigènes, a set of colonial laws that allowed for arbitrary punishment of African subjects without due process. People could be jailed, beaten, fined, or executed simply for being insolent or failing to salute a colonial officer. France claimed to bring civilization, but what they brought was a system that turned entire societies into labor camps. Algeria, the colonial bloodbath. In 1830, France invaded Algeria. But unlike other colonies, Algeria wasn't treated as foreign land. It was declared part of France itself. Yet, the native Muslim population was denied basic rights. Land was confiscated. Arabic was suppressed. Mosques were turned into barracks. For over a century, Algerians resisted. But the real fight began in 1954 with the launch of the Algerian War of Independence. The French responded with overwhelming brutality. Over 1.5 million Algerians were killed, many of them civilians. Torture became official policy. Electric shocks, beatings, waterboarding, rape, and summary executions were used daily by the French military. Entire neighborhoods were cordoned off, and people disappeared overnight. Even French officers like General Paul Ausseresses admitted to organizing death squads. The infamous Battle of Algiers was not just urban warfare. It was psychological warfare, waged against an entire people fighting for their dignity. Guinea, the cost of saying no. In 1958, France offered its colonies a choice: remain part of the French community or go independent immediately, with no support. Guinea, under the leadership of Sékou Touré, said no. In response, France unleashed one of the most petty acts of colonial vengeance in history. Within weeks, they destroyed everything they could: schools, railways, offices. Even light bulbs were unscrewed. Hospital equipment was ripped out. Documents were burned. Teachers and engineers were evacuated. To make matters worse, France pressured its allies to economically isolate Guinea, forcing the new nation into poverty for daring to be free. Cameroon, the silence genocide. Between 1955 and 1962, as Cameroon prepared for independence, France launched a secret war to crush the UPC, Union of the Peoples of Cameroon, a movement demanding freedom. Key leaders like Ruben Niobe and Felix Roland Moumier were assassinated. Niobe hunted down and shot in the forest, Moumier poisoned with thallium in Geneva. Entire regions, especially the Bamileke highlands, were turned into war zones. The French army bombed villages with napalm. Mass arrests and executions followed. Civilians were thrown into pits or burned alive in huts. Some historians estimate the death toll could exceed 100,000, yet it remains one of the least acknowledged genocides in African history. Nuclear tests in the Sahara, Africa as a dumping ground. Between 1960 and 1966, France tested 17 nuclear bombs in the Algerian Sahara. These tests exposed thousands of people to deadly radiation. Local populations, including nomadic Tuaregs, developed cancers, infertility, and birth defects. France denied responsibility for decades. Many documents were kept classified. Victims were ignored. Today, contaminated sites remain, with radioactive waste still buried beneath the desert sands. France would never have dared to conduct such tests in Bordeaux or Marseille, but in Africa, it was treated as expendable. Or neocolonialism. Even after independence, France refused to let go. Through a system known as France-Afrique, it retained control over African economies. The CFA franc, used in 14 countries, remains guaranteed by the French Treasury, which also controls the reserves. In effect, African countries must deposit their money in France before using it. French companies like Total and Orange dominate energy, telecom, and infrastructure. In return, France supported strongmen like Omar Bongo in Gabon and Blaise Compaoré in Burkina Faso, leaders who guaranteed business contracts and crushed dissent. This wasn't independence. It was colonialism 2.0. Military interventions, protecting interests, not lives. In Mali, Chad, Ivory Coast, and the Central African Republic, France has intervened militarily under the guise of fighting terrorism or stabilizing governments. But these interventions often protected French economic interests, not local people. In Rwanda, France backed the genocidal Hutu regime. During the 1994 genocide, French troops failed to stop the massacre of over 800,000 Tutsis and allegedly helped the perpetrators escape. In Mali, Operation Barkhane deployed thousands of troops, but jihadist violence only spread. Civilian protests broke out in Bamako, with cries of "France dégage," "France, get out." By 2022, France was expelled from Mali entirely. Cultural plunder, Africa's stolen treasures. In French museums sit over 90,000 African artifacts, many looted during colonial campaigns. From Benin bronzes to Congolese statues, these were not gifts or purchases, they were war spoils. Despite promises, France has returned only a tiny fraction of these treasures. The process is slow, bureaucratic, and reluctant. To African communities, these aren't just objects. They are sacred artifacts, family heirlooms, symbols of identity and pride. Their absence is a wound that still bleeds. The rising resistance, Africa speaks back. Today, the tide is turning. In Burkina Faso, students chant against the CFA. In Mali, French flags are burned. In Niger, protesters demand an end to foreign military presence. Across the continent, France's influence is crumbling. New alliances are being forged with Turkey, China, Russia. But more importantly, a new generation is waking up. They are demanding control of their currency, their culture, their future. The age of empire is over, and Africa is reclaiming its story. Conclusion: unmasking the empire. France once paraded itself as the beacon of liberty. But behind the slogans of liberté, égalité, fraternité lies a history soaked in the blood of Africans. From Algeria's mass graves to Cameroon's scorched earth, from radioactive deserts to stolen museums, the crimes are vast and the silence deafening. But silence will no longer suffice. France owes not just an apology, it owes accountability through reparations, through education, through the return of every stolen artifact. If you found this video powerful, please subscribe, like, and share it with others. And if you'd like to support our mission to expose buried histories and untold truths, please consider donating. Links are in the description below. This is Sands of History, where forgotten voices echo again and the sands of time reveal what empires tried to bury. Until next time.